Love asks something of us that few people ever talk about honestly. It asks us to be seen. Not just admired, not just desired, but truly seen. And nowhere is that more frightening, more confusing, or more powerful than where sex and emotional vulnerability meet. Because sex, at its deepest level, is not about bodies touching. It is about defenses lowering. It is about walls dissolving. It is about the moment we allow another human being access to the parts of us we usually protect at all costs. Most people think vulnerability is weakness. But vulnerability is courage in its rawest form. It is the courage to say, this is me. All of me. The parts I'm proud of and the parts one hide. The strength and the fear. The desire and the doubt. And when love enters that space, everything changes. We live in a world that teaches us to perform intimacy rather than experience it. We are taught how to attract, how to impress, how to seduce, how to appear confident and in control. But very few of us are taught how to be emotionally naked. So we learn how to give our bodies before we know how to give our hearts. And that disconnect is where so much pain begins. Because sex without emotional vulnerability can feel empty, even when it feels intense. It can feel exciting, even addictive, yet strangely lonely. You can be touching someone and still feel untouched. You can be desired and still feel unseen. And over time, that emptiness whispers a dangerous lie. It tells you that something is wrong with you. But the truth is simpler and harder to face. You were never meant to give your body without also giving your truth. Emotional vulnerability in love is terrifying because it removes our armor. It means letting someone see how deeply you feel. How badly you want to be chosen. How afraid you are of being abandoned. How much it would hurt if they left. It means risking rejection at the core of who you are, not just at the surface. And sex amplifies that risk. Because when sex is real, when it is connected, when it is honest, it exposes our longing to be wanted not just physically, but emotionally. To be held, not just touched. To be cherished, not just desired. That kind of closeness is powerful. And power always carries risk. Many people avoid emotional vulnerability in sex not because they don't care, but because they care too much. They have been hurt before. They have trusted before. They have opened up and been met with indifference, betrayal, or silence. So they learn to protect themselves. They learn to keep their heart guarded while offering their body. They learn to turn intimacy into something casual, controlled, and emotionally distant. And for a while, that feels safer. But safety without connection eventually becomes a prison. Because the heart does not stop wanting just because it is afraid. It just learns how to ache quietly. True emotional vulnerability in love begins with honesty. Honesty about what you feel. Honesty about what you want. Honesty about what scares you. And that honesty must start within yourself. You cannot share what you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot invite someone into your emotional world if you keep denying it exists. So many people say they want deep love, but run the moment it starts to feel real. They crave intimacy, but panic when someone gets close enough to see their flaws. They want passion, but fear the vulnerability that makes passion meaningful. And that contradiction creates suffering. Because love cannot be experienced fully while being controlled from a distance. Sex, when intertwined with emotional vulnerability, becomes something sacred. Not in a religious sense, but in a human one. It becomes a language, a conversation without words, a moment where two people say, I trust you with my truth. And that trust changes everything. It changes how touch feels. It changes how presence feels. It changes how silence feels. Because now, the connection is not just physical. It is emotional. It is psychological. It is deeply human. But vulnerability does not mean losing yourself. It does not mean abandoning your boundaries or ignoring red flags. It does not mean giving someone access they have not earned. True vulnerability is not reckless. It is intentional. It is choosing openness with someone who shows consistency, respect, and care. It is allowing closeness while still honoring your own worth. Many people confuse vulnerability with overexposure. They think it means spilling everything at once, attaching too quickly, or ignoring their intuition. But vulnerability is not about speed. It is about sincerity. It is about allowing your emotions to exist without shame. It is about not pretending you don't care when you do. It is about not numbing yourself just to avoid disappointment. Sexual vulnerability is emotional vulnerability expressed through the body. It is letting yourself feel instead of performing. It is staying present instead of dissociating. It is allowing intimacy to affect you. And that can be terrifying. Because once you feel deeply, you can be hurt deeply. But here is the truth most people never tell you. You are already vulnerable. Every time you desire someone, you are vulnerable. Every time you hope they choose you, you are vulnerable. Every time you imagine a future with them, you are vulnerable. The only difference is whether you face that vulnerability consciously or hide from it unconsciously. Hiding does not protect you from pain. It only delays it, and often, it magnifies it. When you suppress emotional vulnerability, it leaks out in other ways. Through jealousy, through insecurity, through emotional withdrawal, through needing constant validation. Because unexpressed emotions do not disappear. They find another way to speak. Love asks us to be brave in a very specific way. Not loud bravery, not fearless bravery, but quiet bravery. The bravery to say, "This matters to me." The bravery to admit, "You matter to me." The bravery to risk being changed by another person. Sex becomes transformative when it is rooted in emotional presence. When you are not just there with your body, but with your heart. When you are not trying to impress, but to connect. When you are not using intimacy to escape yourself, but to share yourself. That kind of experience leaves a mark. It teaches you something about yourself. It reminds you that you are capable of depth. That you are capable of tenderness. That you are capable of love that is not performative, not shallow, not transactional. But real. And yes, it may not always last forever. Not every vulnerable connection becomes a lifelong partnership. But that does not make it meaningless. Love is not wasted just because it ends. Vulnerability is not a mistake just because it leads to heartbreak. Heartbreak does not mean you were weak. It means you were open. And openness is the price of a meaningful life. People who avoid vulnerability often pride themselves on being independent, detached, and self-sufficient. But beneath that armor is often a deep fear of being unlovable as they truly are. So they control how much they reveal. They control how much they feel. They control how much they allow themselves to need. But love is not something you can control into existence. It emerges when control softens. When defenses relax. When authenticity replaces performance. Sexual emotional vulnerability asks you to slow down. To listen. To feel. To notice. It asks you to be curious about your partner's inner world, not just their physical response. It asks you to be present with your own emotions instead of suppressing them. And presence is rare. We live in a distracted world. A world of comparison. A world of instant gratification. A world of endless options. And in that world, deep intimacy becomes an act of rebellion. Choosing to connect deeply with one person, emotionally and physically, is a statement. It says, "I value depth over novelty." It says, "I value truth over ego." It says, "I am willing to be affected." Being affected is scary. Because it means admitting that someone has power to hurt you. But it also means they have power to heal you. To comfort you. To inspire you. To remind you who you were when you forget. Emotional vulnerability in love does not mean you will never be hurt. It means you will be alive. And there is a profound difference. Numbness may protect you from pain, but it also blocks joy. Detachment may shield you from disappointment, but it also prevents connection. You cannot selectively shut down emotion. When you close your heart to pain, you close it to love as well. Sex without emotional vulnerability can feel like an escape. But sex with emotional vulnerability feels like coming home. It feels like safety without stagnation. It feels like excitement without emptiness. It feels like being wanted for who you are, not just what you offer. And that kind of intimacy changes how you see yourself. You begin to believe that you are worthy of care. That your emotions are not too much. That your desire for closeness is not weakness. That your softness is not something to hide. The right kind of love does not demand that you be less. It invites you to be more. More honest. More present. More real. And yes, being real means sometimes being messy. Sometimes unsure. Sometimes afraid. Sometimes insecure. But love is not built on perfection. It is built on presence. It is built on two people choosing to show up as they are, not as who they think they should be. Sexual emotional vulnerability is not about losing control. It is about sharing it. It is about trusting that your feelings will be met with respect. And when they are not, that is information. It tells you something important. Vulnerability does not bind you to someone who mistreats you. It clarifies who deserves you. If someone cannot hold your emotional truth with care, they are not entitled to your intimacy. In recognizing that is not weakness. It is self-respect. The goal is not to be vulnerable with everyone. The goal is to be vulnerable with someone who values it. Someone who listens. Someone who responds. Someone who understands that intimacy is not just physical closeness but emotional responsibility. Love is not about intensity alone. Intensity without emotional safety burns fast and leaves ashes. But intimacy with vulnerability builds warmth that lasts. And when sex is infused with that warmth, it becomes something that nourishes instead of drains. You stop feeling like you have to perform. You stop feeling like you have to prove your worth. You start feeling accepted. And acceptance is deeply healing. So if you have been afraid to open up, know this. Your fear makes sense. Your hesitation is understandable. Your past experiences matter. But do not let fear convince you that you are safer alone behind walls. Walls keep pain out, but they also keep love out. And love, real love, requires space. Space for mistakes. Space for emotions. Space for growth. Sex emotional vulnerability in love is not about perfection. It is about courage. The courage to feel. The courage to trust. The courage to risk heartbreak for the chance at connection. And that courage is not something you either have or don't have. It is something you practice. One honest conversation at a time. One boundary honored at a time. One moment of presence at a time. You are not broken for wanting depth. You are not needy for craving connection. You are not weak for desiring emotional closeness through intimacy. You are human. And being human means longing to be seen, held, and understood. So allow yourself to feel. Allow yourself to care. Allow yourself to be vulnerable in the ways that feel true to you. Because the greatest love stories are not built on flawless confidence. They are built on honest hearts. And the most meaningful intimacy is not found in control. It is found in connection. When you are ready to let someone see you. And when you are brave enough to see them in return.